She fixed a veteran's Hummer H1 off-road. Sounds like a simple story? Right. But what if I told you that a 25-year-old female mechanic with nothing but a toolbox and a good heart didn't just fix a truck that day? She uncovered a secret legacy, reignited a father's hope, and built a movement that would change the lives of wounded veterans across the country. This isn't just about grease and gears. This is about second chances, silent promises, and one woman who turned a Hummer H1 off-road rescue into a revolution of healing. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. The late afternoon sun beat down on the vast Nevada desert like a hammer on steel. Dust swirled lazily over the quiet highway, miles from the nearest town. That's where Charlie Rivers, 25 years old and already 10 years into turning wrenches, spotted the vehicle. She was driving her old, dented Ford pickup, a toolbox rattling in the bed. When she saw it, a broken-down military-grade Hummer H1 parked awkwardly off-road with its hood up and engine steaming. She slowed instinctively. She couldn't help it. Fixing things wasn't just her job, it was in her bones. She pulled over and stepped out, wiping grease from her fingers onto her jeans. Her long ponytail stuck to the back of her neck, and a faded tattoo of a wrench peeked out from under her shirt sleeve. She'd grown up around engines raised by her grandfather in a small-town auto shop after losing both parents young. Machines made sense to her, more than most people ever did. A grizzled man stood beside the Hummer, kicking the tire in frustration. He looked like he'd come out of another lifetime military jacket, prosthetic leg, and a storm behind his eyes. And just like that, her life was about to change. Jack didn't even look up at first. I called for a tow. He grunted, hands on his hips, sweat trickling down his weathered face. Won't be here for another 2 hours. Charlie Rivers stood a few feet away, eyeing the Hummer's hood. You mind if I take a look? Now he turned. His eyes, sharp and skeptical, scanned her from head to toe. Grease-stained jeans, steel toe boots, black tank top with an oil smudge over the heart, and a face half hidden behind a pair of mirrored aviators. You a mechanic? Born into it, she replied, flashing a faint smile. Besides, I hate watching good machines suffer. Jack paused, then stepped aside. Be my guest. Charlie grabbed her toolbox from the truck and got to work. She didn't talk. She listened to the subtle clicks, the hiss of the radiator, the faint smell of burnt coolant. Jack watched her curiously, arms folded. There was something familiar about the way she moved, methodical, patient, like someone who'd seen more than she let on. You know, he said after a moment, most people would have just driven on by. I'm not most people, she murmured, tightening a hose clamp. They stood in silence for a while, the wind whispering across the flatlands. Jack eventually broke it. I served in Fallujah, lost half a unit in one night. Came back with this, he said, gesturing toward his prosthetic leg. VA doesn't cover half of what it should. This beast, he nodded at the Hummer, was supposed to be my therapy, my freedom. Charlie glanced up, her expression unreadable. Looks like she's overheating. Radiator hose split likely from wear. I can patch it. Won't be pretty, but it'll get you off this road. Jack looked at her, surprised. You carry patch gear. I don't go anywhere without it, she said simply, reaching into her truck and pulling out a roll of military-grade tape and a jug of distilled water. As she worked, Jack spoke again, this time softer. You remind me of someone. Charlie raised an eyebrow. My daughter. He said, she'd be around your age. Her name was Grace. She passed away 7 years ago. Car accident. Drunk driver. Charlie's hands paused. Just for a second. I'm sorry, she said quietly. She wanted to be a mechanic, too. He added, Used to take apart the lawnmower just to see if she could put it back together. Charlie chuckled. Sounds like someone I would have gotten along with. Jack gave a sad smile. Yeah, she had fire in her. She tightened the final seal on the hose and closed the hood. There. Should hold for at least 50 miles. You'll need a full replacement soon, but this'll get you to town. Jack looked at her like he hadn't really seen her until now. You didn't have to stop. I know, she replied, but I did. He reached into the Hummer and pulled out a small wooden box from the glove compartment. Wait here. He opened it slowly and took out a military challenge coin, thick, gold-edged, bearing the emblem of the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. She gave this to me before I deployed the second time. He said it would keep me safe. Charlie's breath caught. I want you to have it. She took a step back. I can't. You can... Jack interrupted. Because today, you were her. You showed up. You didn't walk away. You fixed something and not just the truck. He pressed the coin into her palm. She stared at it for a long time, then finally closed her fingers around it. The weight was more than metal. It was memory, meaning, grace. Jack got in the Hummer, turned the key, and the engine roared back to life. He rolled down the window. You ever need anything? Anything at all? You call me. Reynolds Auto in Carson Hills. I owe you more than just a patch job. Charlie watched him drive away, the sun dipping below the horizon behind him. She didn't cry, not right away. But as she sat back in her truck, clutching that coin to her chest, tears finally came. Not for the patch, not for the compliment, but for something deeper, for the quiet way life sometimes circles back, and how fixing something broken could end up fixing a part of you too. The following week, Charlie Rivers was elbow-deep in the undercarriage of a '78 Chevy in her garage when she heard the rumble of a familiar engine outside. It was unmistakable, that deep, throaty growl of a military diesel. She wiped the sweat from her brow, slid out from under the truck, and stepped into the blinding Nevada sun. There it was, the Hummer H1 gleaming despite the dirt, parked at the edge of her lot. Jack Reynolds stepped out. His limp was less pronounced today, but his eyes held something different, something troubled. Hope you don't mind the surprise, he said. I figured I owed you more than just a thank you. Charlie tossed the rag over her shoulder. You drove 2 hours to say that. He didn't smile. I need your help with something, he said, lowering his voice. And I don't know who else to trust. Charlie blinked. Okay. What's going on? Jack reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, beaten-up notebook. Its leather cover was cracked, the corners torn. This belonged to my daughter, he said, his voice suddenly hollow. Grace kept it from me. I found it in an old ammo box last night while cleaning the garage. Charlie took it carefully, thumbing through pages filled with blueprints, sketches, notes, circuits, engines, designs far beyond what most high school kids could dream up. One particular page stopped her cold. It was a hand-drawn layout of an adaptive vehicle system built for amputees, veterans, anyone with mobility challenges. She designed this, Charlie whispered. Jack nodded. She wanted to build something that gave soldiers their freedom back. Said one day, she'd find a way to make it real. Charlie swallowed hard. This is genius! Jack hesitated, his voice catching. There's more. He flipped to the back, where Grace had scrawled a short note. If anything ever happens to me, I want someone who understands machines and people to carry this on. Someone who still believes in fixing the world, one piece at a time. Beneath it, in shaky pen, were 3 words, Find Charlie Rivers. The world seemed to tilt. I don't understand, Charlie murmured. How did she even know me? Jack exhaled slowly, as if bracing himself. About 8 years ago. You came to a high school in Reno to teach a free mechanics workshop. You were only 17, just out of tech school, volunteering for a veteran support program. Charlie's eyes widened. She was in the back row. Jack continued. You let her stay after class and helped her with a busted carburetor she brought in from her neighbor's ATV. She never forgot that. Charlie stood still for a moment, stunned by the revelation. She followed your work. Said if anyone could build her project, it'd be you. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant buzz of cicadas and the creak of metal cooling in the sun. Jack stepped closer. Look, I know it's a lot, but I've got some old contacts, investors. If you'd be willing to help me bring her design to life, we could make it happen. For her, for others like me. Charlie looked down at the notebook again, then back at the Hummer, then at Jack. You're serious. I've never been more serious, he said, his voice low. This could change lives, but I can't do it alone. I've got the scars. You've got the fire. Charlie's throat tightened. Her chest ached not from exhaustion, but from something deeper. Legacy. Purpose. The ghost of a girl she once unknowingly inspired was now reaching out to her through ink and memory. She nodded slowly. Then let's build it. Together. Jack's face softened, and for the first time, maybe in years, he smiled not out of politeness or pain, but from the place where hope lives after loss. Charlie turned, heading back into the garage. Come on, she called. We've got work to do. And just like that, the girl who had grown up fixing things no one else wanted to touch, and the man who thought he'd lost everything, began building something that could help thousands, maybe even the world. They worked through the heat of summer. Jack brought in parts. Charlie brought the vision. The garage, once cluttered with dusty tools and half-finished pickup jobs, now echoed with the sound of something deeper purpose. The adaptive vehicle system, based on Grace's sketches, began to take shape. Slowly, then all at once. But it wasn't just about bolts and blueprints. It was about healing. One night, around midnight, Charlie sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, her hands greasy, sweat drying on her forehead. The prototype dashboard lay open in front of her, wires everywhere, sensors still misfiring. Her patience frayed with each blinking red light. I'm not sure I can finish this, she muttered to herself. Jack, sitting on an old army cot in the corner, glanced up from his daughter's notebook. That's exactly what Grace used to say. Charlie let out a humorless laugh. Did it help her figure things out? He stood slowly, his legs stiff from the long day. No. But saying it out loud always gave her just enough room to breathe and try again. Charlie closed her eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. I didn't ask for this, she finally said, her voice cracking. I know, Jack replied. Neither did Grace. Neither did I. Life doesn't care about who's ready. She looked up at him, her eyes shining in the dim garage light. Do you ever wonder if you're meant to be more than what's happened to you? Jack didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, every day. The next afternoon, Charlie drove out alone to a veteran rehabilitation center 2 towns over. She needed answers, or maybe just perspective. She met with a woman named Dr. Elise Harmon, a physical therapist who had worked with amputees for 20 years. Charlie pulled out Grace's notebook and explained the project. Elise studied the designs with an expression that softened from curiosity to wonder. She drew this when she was, 17, Elise asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. 18, Charlie said quietly. She died a few months later. Elise shook her head. This isn't just impressive. It's revolutionary. Do you understand what this could mean for my patients, for thousands of veterans? Charlie swallowed hard. I think I'm starting to... Before Charlie left, Elise placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Whatever you need, I want to help. Back at the shop, Jack was working on a new frame component when Charlie burst through the door. I talked to a therapist at a rehab center, she said breathlessly. She wants to help. She thinks Grace's design could be life-changing. Jack paused mid-weld. She really said that. Charlie nodded. And she's not the only one. I reached out to an old mentor at my tech school. He wants to connect us with a prosthetics firm. If we can build a test model, we might actually get funding. Jack's eyes glassed over, but he blinked it away. Grace would have... God... She would have loved this. Charlie smiled, but there was a weight in her chest she hadn't named yet. That night, when Jack had gone home, she stayed late in the shop, tinkering with a faulty actuator. At some point, she dozed off on the workbench, the humming of machines like a lullaby. She dreamed of fire. Not destruction, but warmth. Grace stood in the middle of it, smiling, her arms folded, grease on her cheek. You showed up, she said. Charlie woke up crying. 1 week later, they finished the first full prototype. They called it the GR1, named after Grace Reynolds not just for her initials, but for what it meant: grit, recovery, one step at a time. They scheduled a private test at a local airfield, with Elise and a few of her patients present. As the first veteran, a young man named Marco, with a double amputation, climbed into the seat and took hold of the adapted controls. The whole crowd fell into a hush. He drove 100 yards, turned, and came back, laughing through tears. I haven't driven in 3 years. He choked. I thought I'd never feel this free again. Charlie's hands trembled as she wiped her eyes. Jack stood beside her silent, his hand resting on her shoulder. Today, he whispered, my daughter came back to life. And in that moment, everything, the sweat, the broken bolts, the grief, the guilt, it all made sense. Charlie Rivers had thought she was just fixing a car that day on the highway. But she was wrong. She was building a legacy. 2 days after the airfield test, Charlie Rivers' phone wouldn't stop ringing. A video clip of Marco, the double amputee veteran, smiling through tears as he maneuvered the GR1 across the runway, had gone viral overnight. It had been recorded by one of the therapists and uploaded to social media with a simple caption. He thought he'd never drive again, until this happened. 3 million views later, Charlie found herself sitting in the corner of her dusty garage, staring at her cracked phone screen as emails poured in. Veterans, therapists, engineers, journalists, investors. And then came the email from Washington. Jack walked in mid-morning, a paper coffee cup in hand, his usual limp somehow lighter. You see the news? He asked, nodding toward her screen. Charlie looked up. You mean the fact that I just got invited to speak at the National Veterans Innovation Forum in Deep Sensi? Jack's eyes widened, and he let out a low whistle. That's huge. Charlie wasn't smiling. I'm not a public speaker, she muttered, rubbing the back of her neck. I build stuff. I'm not supposed to be the face of anything. Jack sat beside her on the bench. You weren't supposed to fix my Hummer either. But you did. She let out a shaky laugh. That was different. He looked her dead in the eyes. No, Charlie, that was the beginning. 3 weeks later, Charlie stood on a stage in Washington. Heart thudding in her chest beneath a black blazer she'd borrowed from her aunt. The auditorium was filled with rows of people, military personnel, engineers, politicians, and veterans in wheelchairs and prosthetics. A massive screen behind her projected an image of the GR1. She took a deep breath, gripping the sides of the podium. My name is Charlie Rivers. I'm not a CEO. I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't start a company with a pitch deck and seed funding. I started with a broken Hummer and a promise made by a daughter to her father. A promise she couldn't keep. The room went still. Charlie continued, her voice gaining strength. Grace Reynolds designed the first sketches for what we now call the GR1, an adaptive driving system for wounded veterans. I didn't know her, but one day, her father's car broke down on the side of the road, and I stopped, and everything changed. She paused, letting the silence breathe. I'm just a mechanic, but I know what it means to feel powerless. I know what it means to feel broken and to find your way back, one bolt at a time. She took out the challenge coin Jack had given her and held it up. This isn't just a project. It's a second chance. Not just for our veterans, but for all of us. Applause erupted. Jack was in the front row, his hand trembling slightly as he clutched Grace's notebook to his chest. That same week, the Department of Veterans Affairs pledged a grant to expand GR1 development. A non-profit group offered to help launch a foundation. A retired general requested a meeting to discuss large-scale implementation. And Charlie didn't celebrate with champagne or interviews. She went back to the garage, back to her tools, back to where it all began. Only this time, she wasn't alone. Mechanics and veterans from all over the country began showing up, some with resumes, others just with calloused hands and a hunger to be part of something real. Jack turned his back office into a small classroom. Elise, the physical therapist, hosted monthly feedback sessions with users testing new models. They called the movement Project Grace. Charlie still struggled to believe any of it was real. One night, she stood at the back of the shop, watching Marco teach a new recruit how to install a brake line. The young man, a former Army engineer, had lost his leg in an IED blast and hadn't held a wrench since. Now he was laughing again. Jack walked up beside her, arms crossed. "You still think you're just a mechanic?" Charlie glanced at him, eyes misting. "I think I'm finally starting to believe I'm more—" Jack smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No," he said gently. "You always were." The garage looked nothing like it used to. The cracked floor was still there, and the same old pegboard lined the back wall. But now it was filled with fresh energy voices, laughter, movement. The place had transformed into a buzzing workshop and community hub where mechanics, engineers, and veterans worked side by side. Charlie Rivers stood in the center, clipboard in hand, her once oil-stained hoodie replaced with a navy blue jacket bearing the Project Grace insignia, a silver wrench wrapped in a ribbon of fire, Grace's fire. "You've got about 10 minutes before we test the new joystick interface," Elise said, walking up with a tablet. "The feedback from Walter was solid, but we might need to tweak the pressure sensors." "Already ahead of you," Charlie replied with a smirk, handing her a folded blueprint. "Check line 3. I rerouted the response circuit." Elise looked at her, impressed. "When did you learn this stuff?" Charlie shrugged. "About last night. Couldn't sleep. Grace's design kept talking to me." "That night, after everyone had left?" Charlie stayed behind to clean up. The hum of the workshop's lights was familiar now, a kind of comfort. She walked past the original GR1 prototype, now mounted behind glass on the wall, and paused. It was strange how fast things had changed. 6 months ago, she was just fixing pickups and doing brake jobs to make rent. Now she was leading a team of engineers and medical professionals, heading a non-profit with government partnerships, and mentoring young women in STEM across the state. But none of that had changed her soul. She was still Charlie Rivers, the girl who listened better to engines than to people. And yet, something was shifting. The next morning, a school bus pulled into the gravel lot. Charlie stepped outside, raising a hand to block the sun. A dozen students from a nearby community college climbed out, carrying notepads and wide eyes. Most had never been in a real working shop before. Among them was a girl named Maya, 17. Tiny, with wide-set eyes and grease already under her fingernails. Charlie found her crouched beside the workbench, studying the insides of a digital servo motor. "You like machines?" Charlie asked. Maya nodded without looking up. "They don't lie. They don't play games. They either work or they don't." Charlie smiled softly. "You remind me of me." Maya glanced up, surprised. "You don't seem like someone who used to be unsure." Charlie let out a breath, sitting on the edge of the workbench. "You'd be surprised. I used to think if I wasn't perfect, I wasn't enough." But now Maya asked. "Now," Charlie said, "I know I don't need to be perfect. I just need to keep showing up." Later that week, Jack invited Charlie to a small ceremony at the local VA center. When she arrived, the parking lot was packed with veterans, their families, and rows of GR1 test vehicles lined up for demo rides. Jack stood at the podium, holding a sheet of notes, but he never read from them. He looked directly at Charlie instead. Some of you might know her as the founder of Project Grace. But to me, she's something else. She's the person who showed up when no one else did. The one who took my broken vehicle and somehow fixed both of us. Charlie swallowed the lump in her throat. Jack continued. "Grace once told me she believed in people who build not just machines, but bridges, futures, hope. Charlie Rivers did all three." He turned toward her and motioned her up. Charlie stepped slowly onto the stage, her hands trembling slightly as applause rose around her. She looked out at the sea of faces weathered and young, broken and whole, and for the first time. She didn't feel like an outsider in her own story. She took the microphone and whispered, "I thought I was just fixing something on the side of the road. I had no idea it would fix something inside of me." Back at the garage that evening, she sat alone in front of the framed photo of Grace, a candid shot Jack had found of his daughter, covered in oil, grinning beside a half-built go-kart. Charlie whispered softly, "We're doing it, Grace. We're making it real." And in the quiet, she swore she could almost hear an engine humming back, steady, strong, and full of life. 1 year to the day since Charlie Rivers had pulled over to help a stranger on the side of a dusty Nevada road. She stood on a much bigger stage, not beside a broken Hummer this time, but in front of hundreds gathered beneath a white canvas tent at the Project Grace Launch Center. It wasn't just a garage anymore. It was a 12,000-square-foot facility with 3 labs, a mentorship wing, a testing track, and something that meant more to Charlie than all of that combined hope. The ribbon-cutting ceremony had drawn local news crews, 2 state senators, and veterans from 6 different states who had been part of the GR1 trials. Jack stood beside her, his hand resting proudly on her shoulder, his prosthetic leg gleaming under the desert sun. Charlie took the podium, the same challenge coin Jack had given her hanging from a chain around her neck. Her voice wavered only slightly. "I never meant to start a movement." She began, eyes scanning the crowd. "I just meant to help someone. That's how it always starts, isn't it? You don't plan on changing your life or someone else's with a simple act. You just show up." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. She continued, "I was raised in a little shop with creaky floorboards and a grandfather who taught me to respect every bolt, to listen to machines, to treat the small parts like they mattered because everything breaks if just one piece is overlooked." Charlie paused, letting her breath steady. "That's what we've done here. Not just built technology, but community. Not just repaired mobility, but restored dignity." Applause burst from the front rows. Some wiped tears away. "We've launched over 70 GR1 systems in 6 states. And in the next 12 months, we'll train over 200 veterans and young engineers, side by side, learning, building, and healing, together." Her voice caught for just a moment, As she glanced toward the framed photo of Grace hanging beside the new entrance, the same smiling girl in oil-stained coveralls who had unknowingly lit this fire. "Grace never got to see her idea change the world," Charlie said, her voice softer now, nearly breaking. "But the world is changing because of her. And that's the legacy we all carry every time we turn a wrench." That night, after the crowds had gone and the stage lights were turned off, Charlie sat alone on the test track bench, staring up at the stars. The air was still, peaceful. Jack walked up slowly and handed her a flask of coffee. "Did I ever tell you Grace wanted to be an astronaut before she wanted to be a mechanic?" Charlie chuckled. "That tracks." "She thought the sky was where freedom lived," he said, sitting beside her. "Turns out, it was always on the ground in the grit, in the people who refused to quit." Charlie looked down at the coin again, now warm from the sun and skin. "It doesn't feel like mine." Jack leaned in, his voice quiet. "It is now." They sat in silence, the stars twinkling above them like headlights from another world. The desert, once a place of dust and breakdowns, now felt like sacred ground. The place where one life had ended, another had started, and countless others had been restored. Weeks later, Charlie received a letter, handwritten, tucked in an envelope without a return address. "Dear Ms. Rivers, my name is Elena. My husband, Rob, was one of your first GR1 test drivers, before your program. He hadn't left our home in nearly 2 years. The day he drove again. Our daughter cried in the back seat because she'd never seen him smile like that. You didn't just fix a machine. You fixed a man and a family, and in a way, you fixed something inside of me, too. Thank you. You'll never know how far that one choice, that one moment on the side of the road really went." Charlie folded the letter, her hands trembling. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to cry. Not from exhaustion, not from fear, but from the quiet, humbling realization. That legacy isn't what you build for yourself. It's what you build into others. Anyone can rebuild a life if they're willing to get their hands dirty and believe something better is possible. As the sun sank behind the Nevada mountains, Charlie Rivers flipped open Grace's old notebook not to repair another engine, but to sketch the first blueprint for a nationwide training program pairing veterans with young innovators. A program for every kid who ever felt invisible. For every veteran who thought their story had ended. For everyone who'd been written off, overlooked, or left behind. She understood now the spark that began with a broken-down Hummer on the side of the road wasn't hers alone. It belonged to anyone who had ever been told, "You're just one person." What difference can you make? The answer, all the difference. Because the girl who once fixed engines in silence had become the woman building futures out loud. And for Charlie, and those like her, healing wasn't the end of the road. It was where everything truly began. The end. Up next, 2 more stories that will stay with you long after the screen fades. Click to keep watching and hit subscribe if you believe second chances are worth building.